All right, guys. So we're going to go over the APF Vertical Training Guide. Okay. I've tried to put a good amount of information without trying to make it too intense or too overwhelming. I just want you to have a really good protocol to follow, especially as we approach the off season. And also, if you're somebody who's just trying to jump higher, you want to get closer to Duncan, maybe that's always been a dream of yours. Even if you're older, over the age of 30, you might be approaching 40. I do still think it's possible. You just need to be a little bit smarter with your training. So I'm going to go over this. I'm going to give you some anecdotes, just going to run you through each aspect, why it matters, and then hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. And there's also some example programs at the bottom. I do think when it comes to programs, though, just having worked with so many guys who have this goal, who want to keep playing, who just want to be more athletic, you can't just have this one size fits all approach. Like I bought every program from like the PGF programs to other guys who had programming to subscription services. And I've just kind of dived into every single one and they're all different, right? But they do have a lot of similarities in terms of like the fundamentals. And I think that's what you really need to understand. So I'll just give you my thoughts while we go. So you can go through this table of content just to give you a bit of an idea. Also, if you ever want to just talk to me about program, jumping higher, trying to figure out how to put it together, this is exactly what I help my guys do. Obviously, there's more accountability, less accountability, structure, nutrition, and training, so all that. So if you just hit that link, I'll bring you to type form, just pop your details, just like a register your interest form, and I'll get a notification and I will be in touch. Okay. So I'm not going to spend too much time on my vertical journey. But basically, I got my first dunk at 16. And I think the biggest reason was because I played a lot of sports and I was quite coordinated. So that just helped me put everything together. And then I was playing basketball all the time. So luckily, I had a really good kind of athletic base, foundational base. I was doing a lot of sprinting and jumping already, and I had an early dunk. So ever since then, I've been a 2 foot jumper. And I did a lot of plyometric programs in school. And obviously, knowing what I know now, like in high school, I did 2 month like two programs that were like month long back to back, and they were just like high velocity, like super quick contacts. And looking back at it, it was actually just constant jumping. And I just did it in my driveway, and my driveway was actually at a slant, so I actually think I got like a bit of reactive kind of elasticity bias there because my heel never touched the floor. So yeah, so I was just super springy and like soaked it up, and then I was dunking like super easy, and I was also really, really light. So I think I was quite strong in terms of like my strength to body weight ratio. And then because I was quite strong and I did a crazy amount of plyometrics for 2 months straight, my body just adapted. And that's just kind of how it works. Like you just have to do things over and over until they adapt. So I was dunking pretty easy. And then what I ended up happening is like throughout college, I don't think I ever really dunked in college, which is crazy because I've dunked so much after the age of 30 in like men's league games and Division 3, just because I got more confident and stuff. And I think I was also just jumping higher. So I just got more aggressive and I was just having more fun. And this was, I guess, despite the fact of not really having any cartilage behind my right kneecap. So it's kind of impressive in a way how I've been able to jump higher, be more athletic, and basically hit a 40-inch vertical. Did some aspects of certain programs. So I'm just going to kind of chat you through what I think you should be focusing on, regardless of what your age is. And I think the younger you are, you can actually kind of touch on certain things more. And when you're older, you're just going to have to figure it out a bit because it's harder for you to recover. So you can read through this as much as you want. But this is kind of just like my general reflection and anecdotes. I'm just going to give you some pieces that tends to be in all programs that I usually buy or I've done myself or I've looked into. So first thing is just generally strength training is going to be your biggest bang for your buck, regardless of what your age is. And also if you're fairly lean, right? Because your body kind of your strength to body weight ratio is important. Like if you're squatting 150 kilos, but you weigh 105 versus if you squat 150 kilos and you weigh 90, like that's a big, big difference, right? So getting strong is going to improve your force output because force equals MA, and you'll see that later on. Also, if you are um, worried about risk of injury, like you're going to have less of it because you're stronger. It's like the biggest predictor of injury is how strong you are. So if you can just take care of that, that makes a big difference. And it also, the biggest reason you want to get stronger, besides the force aspect and the injury aspect, is it really does help you build the base to then do more advanced exercise. So like you might do a trap bar as deadlift, you might do a deadlift, you might do a back squat, front squat, belt squat, whatever. But then eventually you're going to have to do things like like a drop squat, or like you drop into a position as fast as you can and then you accelerate out of it as fast as you can with weight on your back. Like I've done that with like 80 to 100 kilos. That's hard to do, and you have to have a good strength base or else you're going to get hurt. So these are all exercises that maybe down the road you have to do that are a bit more specific. That's going to help you jump higher, be more athletic. And that exercise I just told you like helps you turn on and turn off, which is a big part of jumping higher. And also just being an athlete is like how quickly can you just kind of fire, decelerate, accelerate at a given moment, right? So like I kind of said, pretty straightforward. The second thing is jumping more is obviously going to help you jump higher. And then obviously once you start jumping higher, you need to start trying to dunk, right? Because those are completely two different skills, right? I've seen people jump with the ball and they're terrible at it. And I've seen people jump without the ball and they jump really, really high. So for me, the biggest thing with jumping is can you spread it out in your week based on how old you are? Like if you're younger, you should be able to jump more often and recover from it. And obviously like keeping into account how you feel and your knees and all that stuff, sleep. Like one thing we're not going to touch on today is like sleep, nutrition, all that kind of stuff, stress levels. Those things are super, super, super important if you want to get the ultimate vertical and get dunk and all that kind of stuff, right? Genetics also makes a massive difference. Not everyone's blessed with genetics. You can change your muscle fiber types with training, but there's a ceiling to everybody. Not everyone's going to have like 100% fast twitch muscle fibers. You might have 60, somebody else might have 75, but you can still train them and adapt them over time. So, from a jumping perspective, I've seen people who have a shitty jump pattern and I can get 2 to 5 inches on their vertical just by improving the mechanics in about a month. Okay. And it sounds like a lot, and it is. And most people, I think, have this unrealistic expectation of like, how much should I be able to increase my vertical? Some people might be able to increase it by 5, 6 inches in a 6 month period, which is insane. Some people might not even be able to increase it by 2 or 3 inches because of their training age and level, right? And also, if you just don't do the right things. So like for me, when I was at like that 35 to 40 mark, that probably took me like 2 years to get to that 40 mark over time consistently. And I wasn't playing a lot of basketball, which meant I could just focus on lifting heavier. I could focus on jumping more and recovering well. Because when you start running and you start jumping all the time, that's endurance work that essentially conflicts with your muscle fibers, right? Think endurance, slow twitch, fast twitch is more explosive, strength based, long rest times. So when people try to do too many things at once, hence why it's really difficult to jump higher in season and improve your vertical because you're running all the time, you're sprinting all the time, there's always practice happening. It's just really difficult. So that's why you try to maintain your weight and your strength and everything in season, and then you focus on the off season. Okay. But basically, if you're in your late 20s, over 30 years old, approaching 40, you're probably going to have to do smaller jump sessions, maybe more frequently throughout the week so you can recover more. Whereas if you're a younger guy, you can probably jump like 10, 20 minutes at a time, a couple times a week, two, 3 times a week, and in practice and all that kind of stuff. If you're doing the right stuff in terms of your isometrics and your strength work, and still be fine, right? And there's a reason why you see these young guys always jumping out of the gym at a really young age. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. Technique kind of just explained it, but like this makes a huge, huge difference. If you can break your form down, compare it to guys who jump really high, the best dunkers in the world. This is what I do. I do it with a lot of my guys. We put it side by side, and the difference is night and day once they kind of start seeing it. So some people are obviously like visual, so they might just need to see it. Some people like they have to get coached. They just like to have it explained. So you just have to figure out where you are there. The fourth one comes down to creating an impulse and generating force fast, right? So you think about a graph, think about like how fast can you see this like massive spike on a graph when it comes to producing force. So you start from 0 and you go to 100 real quick. Now for me, hang cleans, power cleans, trap bar high pulls, sorry, weighted jumps. These are all elements that are going to help you do that. Weighted jumps, I find is a little bit tougher because it's hard to load this unless you're doing like a trap bar jump and stuff like that. But what I've really, really enjoyed doing personally are trap bar high pulls and cleans and hang cleans, right? I actually didn't do any cleans and hang cleans, if ever, when I hit my peak in terms of jumping high. When I jumped my highest, I was my strongest. I was doing some trap bar high pulls with heavy weight. Usually I was kind of around the like anywhere between like the 60 to like maybe 80-ish, 85% mark is what I was doing with my trap bar high pulls, which was heavy, right? Like I was trap bar deadlifting near like 275, I think, like kg, which is like 500 something pounds, if not more. So my trap bar high pulls at like 80%, I was still having to be in like the 160, let's say, right? Which is heavy as hell. And it should feel heavy as hell because you're trying to produce a crazy amount of force in a short amount of time. So cleans though, like I've never really cleaned often, and I was still cleaning over 100 kilos as somebody who never does cleans. Like I always found out kind of impressive for myself because I don't practice it. I don't use it much in my training. I never really focus on the technique. And I've started doing it more now because I quite like it and I want to get better at it. But I find most people struggle at doing this. So I find trap bar high pulls are really, really good variation. And I would argue you can produce more force with a trap bar high pull. So this is something that you should be trying to focus on. So if you think about like building really good strength, trying to jump more often, and then finding exercise that help you produce power, right? AKA rate of force development, AKA how fast can you produce force on a graph in a really short amount of time, things usually get better for you. Okay. Now, the other thing I would say is as you do all of this, like there's different levels of strength in terms of what you can do. So you could just do traditional strength work, which is like, you have percentages, you do 4x5, 4x4, 5x3, and then take a deload. And then you could change the tempos. But a big thing I've noticed is when it comes to jumping off 2 feet, especially, and just sports in general, like you have to be able to decelerate and accelerate like on a dime, right? And when we talk about decelerating, we're talking about building brakes, okay? So building brakes for me is like eccentric components or isometric components. Think isometrics like a wall sit is a really simple example. Think about eccentrics is like 5 seconds on the way down a squat or 3 seconds on the way down a squat. These are really, really good to help you build brakes, right? Because essentially what happens is you're lengthening the muscle under tension, which is happening when you're decelerating. Think about if you sprint full speed and you try to stop on a dime, like your quads are going to be working really hard to decelerate. So they're lengthening under that tension. So being able to have that kind of eccentric ability is important. So things like step downs where you're doing like a single leg step down really slow on the way down, you touch the floor with the opposite heel and you come back up. Things like an eccentric squat, things like an eccentric leg press. Isometrics are going to help you get stronger as well doing this. And they're essentially kind of doing a little bit of both. Like they're not necessarily eccentrically loading, but isometrics are a great way to get stronger and just build blood flow and improve your tendon ligament strength. So these are all things you can throw in. And the one thing about isometrics, aka like a wall sit, and eccentrics, aka like a tempo squat, is you actually build stiffness in the tendons and ligaments, which basically is a fancy way of saying you can store energy better and then you can release it better. So think about like a rubber band. Let's say you pull it this much, there's a certain amount of energy in there. But if you pull it, let's say 50% more, there's a lot more stored elastic energy. And this is what happens when we create stiffness, right? And there's an argument about how much stiffness you should have versus how much stiffness you shouldn't have, and what's worth kind of pushing for. But generally speaking, like if you can just do some of those exercises, is going to prove that stiffness, which is going to carry over into jumping. It's going to carry over into sprints. And it's just really good for you. So that kind of explains here. So like things like a depth jump from a plyometric perspective helps you build brakes, right? I always say like you're landing, you're absorbing, and then you're coming back up. So this kind of translate over. Bounding is going to help you build brakes. So single leg bounds, double leg bounds. And a good thing about plyos is the more you get better at plyometrics, the more they're going to get intense anyways, because you're going to get better at jumping higher and doing it faster, which means the next reps is going to be harder and harder and harder because you're continuously getting better. So a bit of a longer part on that one, so my bad. I didn't actually put this in here, but I also, when I was jumping my highest, I was also sprinting the most, right? So I was doing like 10 to 20 meter sprints. I was doing resisted sprints. I was doing different types of sprints. And I'm not really surprised by that because sprinting is the most reactive thing. Like your foot is going to be hitting the floor in the shortest possible time versus anything else you do. Like a plyometric, they say a plyometric should be considered plyometric based on how long you hit the floor or how long you're on the floor, right? In terms of your foot making contact and how long it takes for it to come off. Sprinting is the fastest form of this, right? Like your toes, your front foot barely touches the floor. So that's going to carry over to your jumping. And I would definitely say doing both was super, super important, sprinting and max jumps often. And then, yeah, customizing your program. This is where I said, like, if you need help, just register your interest. Like, honestly, I'm not trying to sell my services as much as I want people to obviously work with me. Genuinely, I wish I would have known this sooner, and try not to outpace people who have been in the game for 10 plus years. Like I've been coaching for 10 years. I've been obsessed with jumping higher. I've been buying programs. I've probably spent £1,000 on programs just trying to see how people do it and why they do it. So if you think you're going to put it together on your own, you're probably going to wing it. It's very rare that guys get it right. So if you don't want to do it, you want to save some time, you want to save some money, honestly, just fill out the interest form and I'll just be super honest with what you need. You don't even have to work with me, but at least you get some value. So hopefully that makes sense. So physics of jumping. Now, this is just like for you to understand a few things I just talked about a bit more. So I'm not going to go over it too much, but yeah, I would definitely read this. It's just going to help you get it right from like rate of force development, max strength, stretch shortening cycle. Sorry, it's a bit of a tongue twister, which is a massive part of plyometrics, right? So if you can understand this, you kind of understand why you program the way you program. This is probably a good part though. This is literally all the research that I was able to like pull together from 2018 onwards about plyometric training and just how it improves your vertical jump, right? And obviously it does. It's super, super important from like how you fire neuromuscular, in terms of your coordination, stress shortening cycle, ground contact efficiency. And it kind of just explains like, okay, 4 roughly to 9%, best exercise, depth jumps, bounds, hurdle hops, step up jumps. So just being honest, never really did step up jumps. Okay. I can see why they're important. I do like variations of like a single leg jump sometimes. Hurdle hops, definitely did some. I used to think they were shit. Now I think they're actually quite good. I think it's just dependent on the athlete and if they're actually able to do it, foot contact, all that kind of stuff. Bounding, 100% is something I wish I would have done more. I do a lot of single leg hops, single leg bounds, and that was probably the biggest contributor for me jumping higher off one foot because I had the strength. I just didn't have the stability and kind of the coordination off my one foot and being really comfortable doing it because I've always been a 2 foot jumper. And then depth jumps, 100%. Definitely think they carry over massively, especially if you have something to reach for and hit. So I used to set up my, don't know what you call it, but like the vertical thing with all the sticks where you hit, and that made a big difference. So this just gives you a bit of an idea, like if you're beginner, intermediate, advanced, how many times you'd be doing it. Again, I wouldn't try to put all this together on your own. It's very difficult. So don't wing it because this is how injuries start. So even my guys, sometimes I'll start them with a certain amount of plyometrics and then down the road, I just cut it because it's too much. And we just start with this, the simplest of exercises and they feel way better and do way better in the long run. Programming wise, so how often you should train? Honestly, a lot of my guys, they want to train 4 or 5 times a week, but they can't even get in the gym 3 times a week. So we just start with 2 to 3. You can still make great progress. Same with intermediate, like try to aim for quality over quantity. I don't care how many plyometrics you do a week. When I was jumping my highest, I was probably training 3 to 4 times on average, and I was complementing what I was doing on the basketball court, which was 1 session a week, playing another game, and I was doing a lot of jumps, a lot of cutting and all that stuff in my practice. And then in games, I was just playing the whole game. So then I just complemented everything around it. So I was actually getting all my plyos and my jumps in games and in practices, and then just supplementing that with power work and strength work, and just trying to create force fast. Right, that was honestly what I did, and just get some really good high quality max jumps. So you've got some 4 week training progressions here that you can use. The biggest thing is all about progressive overload. So just making sure that every week you're making it a little bit tougher. So that can be for your plyometrics, for the heights of your depth jumps, to your weights lifted. You're also trying to improve like the mechanics of how you hit the floor. So like hitting midfoot, pulling your toes up in the air, and just getting more efficient with your plyos. Sometimes you don't actually need to add more reps to your plyometrics or weight. You just need to do them more to get better at them. Okay. Adding more explosive intent. So everything I do, this is probably one of the biggest things I'd recommend out of this whole video. That's probably gonna be like 20 minutes, but I don't care. Is the more you can focus on moving everything as fast as possible. It doesn't matter if it's a bench press or if it's a single leg squat, like just do it because you recruit more muscle fibers. It becomes more of a fast twitch exercise. That's everything that carries over into your athleticism. And yeah, that's the biggest thing I could get you to do. It helps your neuromuscular firing, everything. So just to give you an idea of depth jumps, like how you could progress it over time, right? There is a certain cutoff, apparently through research in terms of how high you should go with a depth jump. I think it's around like 36 inches. I've seen guys who do a hell of a lot higher. I've done a hell of a lot higher, and there's mechanisms to that in terms of like how it teaches your body to turn off like certain safety mechanisms. So yeah, definitely be mindful. Like you don't want to be going crazy way too early because depth jumps are considered one of the hardest plyometrics. Like it just shocks your system. I've had days where like my legs feel like jelly and it's just like buzzing because I went from pretty high boxes. So just keep that in mind. Um, Obviously you can read all this stuff, right? I'm not going to go over too much. Just gives you ideas of exercise that you can do. But ultimately, it's strength comes down to doing things that don't hurt you. So if you're not healthy, don't be doing all this shit, right? you got to get healthy first, and then you got to get strong, and then just find the exercise that help you get strong. So whether you're doing machines or you're doing barbells or you're doing dumbbells or you're doing a mix of it, like I don't care, isometrics, you should be doing that. All right. Then there we go. Actually, I was talking about sprinting at one point. So sprinting, high velocity movements, and specificity. So specificity just means if you want to get better at something, you got to keep doing that thing more, right? So I was talking about like sprinting, jumping higher. So just have a quick read through this. A lot of this makes sense. So like short sprints, sled sprints, bound acceleration is all stuff I just talked about. Fast twitch muscle activation. Okay. Tips, technique, common mistakes. Again, went through all this overtraining, not lifting heavy enough, too much endurance work, poor technique, and then putting it all together. Okay. So again, I've talked a lot here, so I don't want to read through stuff I already talked about. But if you have any questions, like I said, just hit the link, fill out the interest form. Happy to help you out, explain how my programs work. It might be that you actually need a lot more accountability, a lot more structure with your food. It might just be that you need to lose a shit ton of weight and you want to get more athletic, or you might just be somebody who needs a program, right? Whatever it is, don't hesitate. Drop me a register interest form if you want to talk more. Now, program wise, you've got 3-day jump program. Okay. So it gives you an idea: lower body, upper body accessory work, full body eccentric loading. Okay. So this is like a template, right? You can use this, and I bet you a lot of you would actually benefit from this rather than just winging it. So feel free, you can use that. It goes through day 2, speed focus, all that kind of stuff, right? 4-day jump training, again, talks about max strength, speed, power development, unilateral strength, right? You can go through all that. And then you also have a 5 to 6 day jump program. Okay. So again, I put this together. It's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Like I think it's quite generic, but it's a lot of stuff that most people don't do. So you can use that. There's obviously no warm up or anything like that. And I would massively recommend you always do some testing before you figure out if you have any injuries, imbalances, because all that stuff we take care of in my program. And yeah, that's pretty much it for all the programming. I'm just going to see if there's anything. You can go through the takeaways, and then there's loads of references, right? So references that I actually use to put this together. So you can have a look at some of these if you want to go read it. I couldn't seem to link it to the doc, and I'll be honest, because it's a freebie, I wasn't going to go through every single one. But yeah, so hopefully you get the idea, all right? But ultimately, you just need to have a program in place, and I would just massively urge you to have a long-term mindset to jumping higher. It's not something that's going to improve in 2 to 3 months unless you have really shitty mechanics and you don't jump often and you're hurt right now. So obviously a big win for you is going to be being able to do that without pain. So that's a massive, huge win that I would definitely celebrate. But then after that is building the base and building your strength up. You should be aiming to hit, 1.5 times body weight on a squat, 1.5 times to 2 times body weight on a trap bar. You should be aiming to do some power work, throughout your phases and your blocks, but you have to have it structured. So like all the things I just talked about, putting it together is easier said than done. I'm going to have a vertical program dropping here in the next month, especially for the off season. So definitely keep your eye on that. Obviously, if I don't speak to you beforehand in terms of registering your interest in the forum, that's cool. But yeah, hopefully that helped. I apologize if it's a bit long, but if you want to get good at something, you need to understand it and you need to break it down and you just need to listen. And a lot of shit, like anything that's worth having, is going to take graft. It's going to take a lot of time. And it took me, yeah, a long time to build up my vertical from when I was like 25, 26 and having knee pain and all that stuff. And now I'm 34. So you think that's nearly a decade of just working and learning and get to that point. So hopefully it helped. Appreciate you listening. Like I said, hit the register interest form if you want a bit of coaching. See you later.